I feel really privileged to be here tonight amongst all of you, and I'm assuming that you're all highly educated. And I just feel that perhaps I should have been one of these people sitting on the panel tonight, but what kept me out of university was high school. I've been doing what I do virtually my whole adult life, and the reason, in fact, that I came along this evening originally was to talk about the value of humour and laughter as a contributor to general health in the community. And I could bore you with all of this, but there's a huge amount of stuff written on the net about the value of laughter and how it enhances all sorts of things. Maybe not the right time to say this, but probably the most interesting thing it does enhances libido. And you can decipher that one on the way home tonight, if you're lucky enough to experience that. We've actually, because of the amount of time I've spent doing this, I've actually witnessed it and experienced it at first hand. But let me just tell you a little bit about myself, because I'm a little bit nervous here tonight, because what I do for a living, if I'm on stage, can be a little bit in your face. Sometimes people get offended, sometimes people are not sure whether they can laugh or not, but I think that's one of the major problems in society, especially in a society like ours, is the fact that we're not sure if we can laugh or not. We are not sure whether if we're laughing we're offending people, or if in fact we're laughing it is appropriate. So let me just tell you a little bit about my background. I was born on the south coast of KwaZulu-Natal, a place called Amanzimtoti. And if you're Afrikaans, there's a good chance that your parents had timeshare there a few years ago. And so yeah, the Afrikaans people get exactly what I'm talking about. But we were very poor. I know it's a relative term when you look at the poverty around the country today. But I mean, we couldn't afford things like laxatives. Mum would sort of put us in the toilet and tell us ghost stories. I don't expect you all to get that either, no. And I remember one Christmas I said to my dad, because I knew him, I said to my dad, look Dad, I've got no clothes and nothing to play with. So he bought me a pair of trousers, he cut the pockets out, that was, I'm just seeing where we can go there with this. But then of course the good news and bad news about growing up in the South Coast during the 50s, the good news was we didn't have pedophiles. And the bad news was you had to buy your own sweets. So you can work that one out for yourselves, all right? So if you can understand where I'm coming from, I think what tends to happen is that people get involved in comedy. And I think there's a comedian resident in just about everybody on the planet. Because one of the great desires of people, I think, is to amuse your friends, to make them laugh, to be able to stand up in a group like this, or even with your mates around a bar, and to tell a joke that makes everybody laugh, because it kind of gets everybody in the right frame of mind. Now, the actual act of laughing and the laughter has some amazing health effects. I mean, first of all, it improves your circulation. There are some esteemed doctors here who would actually totally agree with that. It increases endorphins, which reduces stress. It immediately allows the body to relax. It empties your lungs, okay? Which is a really efficient way of cleaning. It's got a hugely cleansing effect. One of the other things I've found is that if you are able to laugh and smile a lot, found that actually communication is so much easier. I mean, if you are someone who smiles a lot, people are naturally drawn to you. It'll neutralize conflict. It improves communication in the workplace. And because of what I'm doing right now, I've actually seen people transform in the space of 10 minutes from being really stressed out into just relaxing and being themselves. And of course, we're very attracted to people who laugh a lot. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, and I'm sure of the people that you know, there are people in your communities, there are people in your kind of friend, your group of friends that laugh a lot, that make you laugh, that actually improve your life. And of course, it's a great diffuser of conflict. I mean, I found that, of course, the minute you get into conflict with someone, the minute you can make them laugh or smile, immediately you take away the intensity or some of the intensity of that. So it's a great, I believe, a very, very clever and a very powerful way of actually communicating, is to incorporate a little bit of humor. If you're a naturally resentful person, there you go. Someone will make you laugh. It kind of drifts away. And in my particular case, I remember when I was very young, because people ask this question, why do you do what you do? and I look around and you guys have spent many, many years studying to get where you are. I have spent many hours standing on stage working to all sorts of people in theatres and in bars where people have been inebriated or drunk, which makes it a totally different type of challenge. But most of all, why did I start doing this? Well, I'll tell you, I remember coming home from school one day when I was younger and my parents had moved. Okay, now you see, immediately I look around the room, there's some of you laughing, not sure whether it's okay to laugh at that, or whether in fact I'm telling the truth. Well, it's partly true, because you don't get to stand on stage in front of people and try and make them laugh if you've had a reasonably, let's say, tranquil or structured upbringing. I mean, you know, so I remember being in about standard 4. You remember when education had standards? Sorry about that. Okay. This is actually the wrong place to say that, isn't it, really? But I do believe in the value of all. I remember being in standard 4, and somebody said to me, and this is a typical sort of question you get when you're that age, they said, "Hey Joe, what are you going to do when you're big?" And I said, "Oh, that pretty little girl in the corner over there." Okay, well, they didn't get that either, don't worry, okay? They didn't find that particularly funny. And then when I first started doing it, because I mean, you know, I was in the Merchant Navy for a couple of years, partly due to the kind of lifestyle I had when I was a child. But when I first started doing this, and once again, every single one of you sitting here tonight has a totally different sense of humor. We might laugh at a lot of things. We're an incredibly diverse country, and of course, humor, I believe, has been a very, very valuable diffuser of our differences, and it kind of, I would say, kind of dissolves the lines that we've drawn between us. And I'll give you an example. We've done, you know, so I've been doing comedy all over the country. I've worked overseas, and one of the things we did in the early 2000s was we started doing a regular stand-up comedy night in a place called Carnival City, which, if you know a little bit about the demographic in Johannesburg, you know it's a fairly blue-collar part of South Africa. I would say politically fairly right-wing. And I would say most of the people that used to go to the casino, and probably still do, were white. And we arrived there and started doing comedy on a Friday and a Saturday night. And if you do get out and watch stand-up comedy, most of the comedians in South Africa, it's one of those incredibly wonderful things that kind of reflects the demographic. So it's not like we had to put people on stage in the affirmative action style. You got on stage because you were funny enough. And I will tell you now that 80 to 90% of the working comedians in South Africa are not white. So we were fantastic. It was actually so easy for us. But this was the interesting thing. At Carnival City, on Fridays and Saturday nights, the audiences were predominantly white, and we had black comedians going on stage. And immediately there was this little bit of tension. What was this guy going to say? And I'll tell you this, it's been one of the great things that I've observed in comedy in South Africa, to see people laughing at themselves and being entertained by somebody who maybe culturally they're not that access to, has been one of the greatest things that I've seen in comedy in this country. In fact, even to this day, we have a comedy club in Monte Casino, but a comedy club now has just opened at Silver Star Casino out in Krugersdorp. To see people laughing at themselves has been one of the greatest experiences for me. We are far too stitched up. We are far too serious about ourselves. We are so worried about what people might think if we let that outer facade slip away. And what happens when you laugh? You forget about that. And people really let themselves go. So over time, is the sort of work that I've been doing, I've been through many phases of this, and I've worked, as I say, since, in fact, started in 1971, and in the early years used to work 4 hours a night, six nights a week, 12 months a year. Now you're probably sitting thinking to yourself, well, how could you do 4 hours of comedy, 6 nights a week, 12 months a year? That's exactly what you did. I can sing a little bit, so I used to play a bit of guitar, but over a period of time, what I found is that people in this country are beginning to laugh at themselves. And it's not a requirement to be able to laugh at yourself, because I think there's an element of political correctness that has skewed us as a society. We've become very edgy. We've become a little bit defensive about who we are. We're Afrikaans, or we're English, or we're Zulu. And actually, really, at the end of the day, once you remove all of that, we're just South Africans. We're just people. And I'll give you an example. I mean, as I say, I've travelled fairly extensively. You go to a place like Australia, where it's first world, and it's kind of, I think a lot of us would aspire to the ethic, the work ethic, the ethic around crime. They're very clean, they're very structured society. But this is where comedy comes in, because of the way we are in this country. I remember, you go to Australia and they drink a lot. They don't drink and drive. We drink and drive, because if you didn't drink and drive, you wouldn't get home on a Friday night. It's a fact, But they drink and drive, they get inebriated, and we don't. There's a lot more kind of, I would say, more powerful words we use to describe the way we drink. But one of the things I could not understand is you go to Australia and you drive in your motor car and you pull up at a traffic light in Sydney, in a first world city like that. You pull up at a traffic light in Sydney and there's nothing to buy. Now, I don't know about you. I really don't understand why it is that's one of the things they couldn't have taken from South Africa and really enjoy it as a first world country. I don't know about you, because in this country, you can buy black bags, coat hangers, 3 years supply of super glue and a card like that for 12 Rand 50. That's always something you forget when you go to the CNA, isn't it? Super glue. And I actually remember the very first time I encountered one of these vendors, or it could have been Zulu, I don't know, but he was standing at the robot. He was standing at the robot and he was selling nachos, okay? Now, once again, I think a lot of people get the wrong impression about this, because some South Africans are very annoyed about the fact that there are people standing at the robots doing stuff. I mean, we've had American comedians come out to this country and they are absolutely gobsmacked that this goes on. You wouldn't walk in the street in America. The fact that you can hand 100, or just by the way, quick show of hands. How many people sitting here this evening give money to traffic policemen? Thank you very much, sir. There's one honest guy here this evening. So there I am, the very first encounter with a guy at the traffic lights, and he came up to, and I'll just excuse my accent. It's so much easier in comedy to use an accent, because it saves you making a description of exactly who you're talking about. But he was selling nachos. Came up to the window and he said, buy the nachos. I said, no thank you. No, look, it's nice, it's nice. I said, I don't want any. No, look, it's right. I don't want any nachos, okay? Hey man, I'm very hungry. Eat your nachos. No. So you take an everyday situation, you twist it a tad. But what I mean about laughing at ourselves, we don't do enough of that. And I'll give you another example. Now, sport is a very, very, very important aspect of life. And in fact, I think it's pretty much all over the world. People identify with their national teams. We're exactly the same. Doesn't matter how badly they're doing. We love them to bits. Now, one of the things about living in this country, which I struggle a bit with, is that we've got a bit of a tall poppy outlook. You can do 100 things right, you do one thing wrong, and that's what you get remembered for. Okay, the best example I've got is, I don't know if you guys remember, about 14 years ago, we sent a cricket side to the West Indies. They won a 5-day series, they won a 1-day series, and the only thing people remember about that cricket tour was the dagga smoking incident, okay? Now, I don't understand it. I mean, look at Herschel Gibbs. Look how close those eyes are together. Then ask yourself the question, was that the first time he smoked dagga? I don't think so. And then what was Paul Adams doing when he was bowling upside down? Looking for the scaife. I mean, these guys have been smoking for years. And then you can't, and once again, this is what I mean about laughing at ourselves. You can't talk about cricket in this country without talking about Hansie Cronje. Now, once again, there's a moral issue right there and there. And I think half of you might think he was a hero. Some people are not so gracious in their assessment of him. But when he got caught, I remember there was a movie on circuit about 30 years ago, or maybe not as long as that, but a thing called Indecent Proposal. Because let's be honest about it, that's what it was. It was an indecent proposal. And I remember seeing this movie, and of course the Indecent Proposal movie, what actually happened was Robert Redford offered Woody Harrelson $1 million to sleep with Demi Moore. And I remember seeing the movie, and about 2 weeks later I said to my mate, I said, tell me, would you let your wife sleep with someone for $1 million? And he thought of it for about 2 seconds, he said, yep. I said, why is that? He said, because right now she's doing it for nothing. That's why. Okay. And if there's one thing, and once again, this is where we are culturally so different, one thing that you've got to really respect Hansie Cronje for. Got to be the only white person in history that's ever taken money off an Indian. Now that's a joke, right? And guess who's laughing the most here tonight, okay? Okay. I actually haven't got a lot of time here tonight, but one of the things about comedy, and once again, as I say, I've been involved in it for many, many years, and it really, I would say, as much as you have places where people go to, to bars to have a drink, you want to laugh, go to a comedy club. And once again, you've got to stop taking yourself too seriously. I remember, this taught a story. People walk up and they tell you little stories. I mean, guys came up to me and said, oh, there was a story about this guy who'd been married for 6 months. Okay, has anybody recently been married? Quite a mature lot here this evening. No? Any single people here? Okay, your turn's coming. No, he said this guy had been married 6 months, and after a while, his new wife, 6 months later, she said to him, I'm getting really angry about the amount of golf you play every Saturday morning. Every week you play golf. Every single week. It's beginning to annoy me. And he looked at her and he said, you're beginning to sound like my ex-wife. She said, I didn't know you'd been married before. He said, I haven't. Well, I'll tell you one more story. Before I do, thank you very much for inviting me along here. Unfortunately, I can't stay because I've got a few issues to deal with. But thank you. I really feel very privileged to be amongst you, really educated people, except of course for the camera crew. It took a couple of seconds here. What happens is that we all have this developed sense of humor. It doesn't matter how far it is, we can laugh, some people don't. But often people say, where do you get your jokes from? Because let's be honest about it, you hear jokes, and most of you people will hear a joke and you're going to go and try and tell it the next day, and you make such a mess of it because you put the punchline in the wrong place, and it was funny last night. But meantime, what actually happened was you didn't get it right. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. Some years ago, I was doing one of these coastal cruises from Durban, and we were going somewhere up to Mozambique. And it was the first morning outside Durban. And I was sitting up on deck. We'd all had a few drinks the night because I'm real, okay? I drink, okay, and I do all the sort, and I do the other things too. But we were sitting on deck, a little bit hungover, and this Afrikaans guy came down and sat at the table, and he stuttered really badly. And he told the joke. Now, I can always tell by the first line of a joke if I've heard the joke before. Anyway, so I'll relate the story, and I'll try and be as true to the original as possible. But he sat down there and he said, there were these two cowboys, Jan and Piet. Okay, now, immediately I'm laughing because I think Afrikaans cowboys. Now, come on, Anyway, he said, and they were in this western town, and they wanted a dop, but they didn't have any money. So they thought, now, how are we going to get money for a drink? So they thought what they would do is they'd go into the bar, they'd walk up to the bar counter, and they'd try and scheme a dop out of the barman. Okay, so they walk in there, up to the bar counter, and they said to the barman, ek sê barman, gooi eens 'n dop. So the barman said, het julle geld? Because he was also Afrikaans. Okay. And they said, nee, ons het nie geld nie. So, you can nie 'n dop kry. So they go and sit in the corner of the bar. And they're waiting there and they're just trying to work out how can I get money for a drink. About 10 minutes later, this guy walks in and he's got a Red Indian's head by the hair like that. He walks in, remember this is a joke, okay? Walks in, puts his head down on the counter like this, and the barman walks over, looks at the head, pulls out a bottle of whiskey, puts the whiskey down, picks up the whiskey and walks out. So Jan says to Piet, so kyk aan, ons moet ons reindeer se kop gaan kry. So they're out there, they jump on their horses and they're galloping along, and they check down in the valley, there's a Red Indian guy walking by himself. So they gallop down there, they bliksem on the head, and now Jan's got his saw out, and he's sawing the Indian's head off like that. Okay. So Piet's standing behind him, he looks up on the top of the hill there, and he checks in, there's about 2,000 Red Indians just standing watching him like that. He says, hey Jan man, he says, kyk man, ek is besig, Jan man, kyk man, ek is besig, but says, Jan man, kyk aan man. So Jan stands up, looks at these guys, says, jy's dus Piet, vanaan gaan aan fucking dronk wees. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and it's been a great pleasure and privilege to be here tonight. Thank you.